Thank you for inviting me to this conference on an important topic. I will talk about macroeconomic volatility today, an element that is also in the title of this conference, and my personal views, not necessarily those of the ECB board or council. So macroeconomic volatility and its implications for the financial sector and for economic policies. The pandemic and the war in Ukraine have led to a very significant increase in macroeconomic volatility in the euro area. One of our board members last month, Isabel Schnabel, she in her Jackson Hole speech emphasized that, also highlighted the increase in macroeconomic volatility, and Greece will not be able to escape that. In Greece, when you look at output volatility over the past few years, the past 2 years, that volatility on one measure was around twice as high as it was during the sovereign debt crisis. Inflation volatility in Greece has surged to now highest levels since the 1970s. So looking ahead, policymakers in the euro area will find themselves in a less favorable situation, in a rather challenging environment over the medium term, one with adverse developments and an environment in which shocks are potentially larger, more persistent, and maybe more frequent. Demographic developments and expenditure needs and costs resulting from the war in Ukraine may put additional pressure on growth and public finances. And of course, climate change is another major driver. I think the experience in the last few years leaves no doubt that the incidence and severity of extreme and disruptive weather events are rising sharply. And they expose economies to greater volatility in output and inflation. And future pandemic waves and geopolitical challenges will add to that instability. Now, Greece, of course, has had its periods of economic volatility, but I think this type of volatility has a new dimension. There are new sources of volatility here that are more external, that are more difficult to control. Now let me say a few more words on climate, because I think one thing worth mentioning is the ECB climate stress test that the supervisory arm of the ECB did, and the results of which were published on the 22nd of July this year. That was the first climate stress test for euro area banks. And the results show that factoring in climate change considerations into stress testing frameworks and internal models is a key challenge for euro area banks. Now let me mention 3 insights from that climate stress test that I think are very important. One insight was that around 60% of banks in the euro area do not yet have a climate risk stress testing framework. Most banks do not include climate risk in their credit risk models, and just 20% consider climate risk as a variable when they grant loans. That's the first insight. Second insight is that almost 2/3 of banks in the euro area, banks' income from non-financial corporate clients stems from greenhouse gas intensive industries. So banks continue to rely heavily on activities that may come under pressure in the medium term. The third insight is that the stress test also provides visibility on potential losses in case of extreme weather events and under transition scenarios, and it confirms that physical risk has a heterogeneous impact across European banks. Banks' vulnerability to droughts and heat waves, for example, is highly dependent on the sector and on the geographical location to which they are exposed. That sounds intuitive, but it is important given that it is really the first time that we map these things in a consistent way across countries in Europe. And as I said, these findings relate to European banks, but they're of course relevant for Greece as well. And they're not just important for the banking sector itself. We always talk about the banking sector because that's our focus. But evidently, these are issues that are highly relevant for societies at large. So the key question then is, what can be done about this? how should we prepare for a macroeconomic environment that is more volatile? And I think the key idea here is really to strengthen resilience. Now, resilience comprises two dimensions. There is a preventive dimension, so that has to do with preventing the buildup of vulnerabilities, including vulnerabilities to climate change, energy dependence, but also vulnerabilities coming from macroeconomic imbalances. And there is a second dimension that has to do with the ability to absorb shocks, for example, via buffers, via flexibility. So to create the capacity to engineer a swift rebound when such shocks occur. Now, structural reforms are crucial to address both these aspects of resilience. And that brings me, structural reforms, to the title of this session. Reforms can help the economy to move away from dependence on fossil fuels, and the shift to greener technologies will also make Greece less vulnerable to disruptions in energy supply and reduce its dependence on external suppliers of energy. On top of that, reforms can help to raise productivity growth and investment, addressing also demographic challenges by making the economy more open, more flexible, and more competitive. And a key component of a reform strategy is to fully implement the RRP, the Recovery and Resilience Plan. But there are also other reforms that one can think of. Now, on the second element of resilience, so the ability to adjust, shocks can be better absorbed when fiscal and financial buffers are strong. So ensuring public debt sustainability, for example, remains crucial to provide room for maneuver during bad times. For the banking sector, it means that asset quality should be improved further. There's been a lot of progress, but we're not yet fully there. Banks also need to have strong capital buffers. That is, of course, the essence of having capital buffers, to be able to deal with potential losses. And finally, when allocating credit, it's important for banks to adequately factor in and monitor risks stemming from macroeconomic volatility, including from risks stemming from climate change. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.